Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back in the room. I have been asked, okay, this is a bit weird, but this is where you get to be friendly, if you could shuffle in the middle a bit in case other people come in. So if you've got lots of spaces around you, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if you could cozy up, that would be much appreciated. And if you're from BSI especially, just cozy up. So thank you very much for being so prompt and getting back in the room and getting to know each other so well. So part two of our day will hopefully build on what you've heard this morning and also on the workshops that you've had so far. As you will know, probably, we are the national standards body for the UK, so BSI operates that, and we have a very close relationship with our friends and colleagues in government, and in particular from DBT. And we are incredibly honoured and proud that today we are going to introduce to you the Minister who is going to talk to you before he joins our panel. So I'm going to quickly go on and introduce our closing headline speaker, who is Kevin Hollinrake MP, Minister for Enterprise, Markets and Small Business. He is a member of the Treasury Select Committee. He was appointed Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Department for Business and Trade in February 2023. And what's additionally attractive about him is he has a background in business, having been a founding partner of Hunter's Estate Agents. The Minister is a strong advocate of small and medium-sized business sector and of the North. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Minister onto the stage for his opening remarks. Thank you.
It's always good to get that out of the way about the estate agents thing, don't you? I'm probably the only person who's entered Parliament and improved his social standing, I think. But ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you to the BSI for inviting me and for arranging today's event. The focus of the event is the UK's national quality infrastructure and regulation of emerging technologies. And as I found out when I became Business Minister, and for me it's a great privilege to be Business Minister, having been in business for 30 years of my life. But I hadn't quite appreciated the importance of the national quality infrastructure until I became Business Minister. And Scott, indeed, was one of the first people I met, one of the first meetings I had. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect. But it's been I've understood its importance and the fact that standardisation is one of the 4 components of the UK's quality infrastructure, and it really has been an unexpected pleasure to be involved in this particular sector. Because standards, as you know, support many of our government objectives. These include promoting better regulation to encouraging innovation, increasing exports, and protecting the environment. As a trading nation, and you may be interested to know, the UK was until recently the 6th largest trading nation in the world. It is now 5th, which is really good news, and that's since 2021. So reports of the death of the UK economy are greatly exaggerated. As a trading nation, this government champions the importance of international standards and an active, robust national quality infrastructure. My department, the Department of Business and Trade, is focused on making sure trading in and with the United Kingdom gives businesses a competitive edge. I'm delighted to share that DBT continues to respond to digitisation and new technologies in several ways. Today, I'd like to mention our recent consultation on the UK's product safety review. The current framework was not designed for modern supply chains, digital technology, and e-commerce systems that we have today. We must, of course, support innovators by developing a framework to help them navigate the opportunities and challenges created by new tech. We continue to take a range of actions to ensure that consumers are as safe shopping online as they are on the high street. It is one of a common refrain from me as Business Minister that we need to make sure all businesses operate on a fair and level playing field. Earlier this year, I held a round table with 4 of the largest online marketplaces globally, urging them to do more to prevent dangerous products being sold. The UK is making excellent progress in unlocking barriers for businesses and regulating emerging technologies. Ultimately, international trading relationships are built on trust. That trust is built via a structure of standards, measurement, accreditation, enforcement, and market surveillance. All of these are, of course, the pillars of national quality infrastructure. The NQI is delivered by our world-class institutions, the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, the British Standards Institution, the National Physical Laboratory, and the Office for Product Safety and Standards. A strong national quality infrastructure instills confidence in businesses and consumers. Goods and products in our market should be safe, environmentally friendly, and comply with strong governing regulations. As the sponsoring department for BSI, we support the key role that they perform in shaping standards. I also know the immense value they bring in delivering this work and using their strong international reputation and influence to promote UK interests within international bodies. I know they are collectively thinking about how to increase this further. I regularly meet with NQI partners to consider the benefits of NQI and how more could be achieved. I also ask partners what I could do to support more collaborative working so it can be more than the sum of the parts. My department recognises all the benefits that standards and accreditation bring to all those involved in the supply chain and, most importantly, to consumers. To sum up, we are all committed to working closely together to contribute to a strong and thriving UK economy with a robust and effective product safety framework. I look forward to seeing what the future holds in this space, and I'm very proud of the work we have done to date. Thank you once again, and I very much look forward to answering some of the questions you all may have next. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone in particular?
Our three other panelists come and join us as well. Take a seat. Anywhere you like.
Quite close to the action here, David.
You're right. It's the way it is. Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Bell. Nice to see everybody, and thank you for those words, Minister. And we're joined on the stage by what the Minister described there as the NQI, the National Quality Infrastructure Partners. So we have Scott Steedman, Director General of Standards at BSI, Matt Gantley, UCAS CEO, we have microphone as well, and we have Neil Stansfield, the Head of Strategy at MPL. So good to see you all. So maybe we just start with some reflections on what the Minister was saying there. I mean, obviously we're three independent organisations working together, but the Minister there talking about digital future. Neil, you're the only one with digital in your job title. That must resonate with you and the work that you're doing at the National Physical Laboratory.
Yeah, very much so, David. Thank you, and thank you to the Minister for the introduction. I think we're a little bit different to some of the other members of the NQI as a national laboratory. So we employ nearly 1,500 scientists and engineers, and they're working in the technology areas, delivering the leading edge science. So the whole role of standards, regulation and legislation, if you like, feeding up for us, is built on a technical foundation. And I think it's a really exciting time. I've just returned from the Republic of Korea, where we were, South Korea, of course, where I've got a 30-year background in defence and national security, so they don't allow me north of the parallel. But we were talking very much about the emerging technologies. And in my career, I've looked at standards for technology through a number of different prisms, but we're now very focused on the emerging technologies. We had the AI summit last week, the quantum showcase in October, early November, and those emerging technologies where the UK is playing a leadership role are the things in my mind that we as if I were to call it a digital quality infrastructure backed by the government or a national quality infrastructure, can really help the UK be at the forefront.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Matt, just reflecting on that digital element in particular and the way we work together as a quality infrastructure.
Very much so, and again, I would welcome the words of the Minister. They're very welcome, especially those aspects describing what the national quality infrastructure is, the combined effort and the individual efforts of BSI, UCAS and NPL. First of all, just a brief introduction of UCAS itself. We are the national accreditation body appointed through the accreditation regulations. Ultimately, our purpose is to ensure trust and confidence in the products and the services that we all rely upon, ensuring that conformity assessment, testing, inspection and certification is competent, has professional integrity and is impartial in what it does. And that applies to so many sectors across our economy and the way that we live our lives and our daily lives and our work lives and our economy and the way that we trade as a nation with other nations. And so it covers a huge spectrum of activities. Now, in particular, when it comes to some of the fascinating discussions that we've seen in today's conference with artificial intelligence and the opportunities of quantum computers, the accelerating effects that they will bring in combination to material sciences or to synthetic biology. There's so many opportunities, and so our quality infrastructure is critical to ensuring that as an economy we adapt to those opportunities. And I think as institutions we already have a very strong partnership. I think UCAS actually came from the laboratories of Teddington several decades ago as the British Calibration Service, and our connection is deep-rooted at a strategic and a technical level. And so, as a minister highlighted, so digital for us is very much a logical step and something we've been working on for many, many years. But there's new challenges which require a very agile approach of development of standards and the integration of conformity assessment. We won't always, as a national quality infrastructure, work together. There are, for example, in consumer protection, BSI has developed a suite of standards, guidance standards, for example, in product recall, that didn't necessarily call upon traceability in metrology or conformity assessment. But there are opportunities, especially in quantum and especially in artificial intelligence, where the three partners certainly need to work together. So very much we welcome the words of the Minister, and especially being digitally enabled is key to our future.
Right, and we might come back to that question later, Matt, about how the independence of the three organisations can be a form of strength. But Scott, on that digital element in particular and the role of the national quality infrastructure?
Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Minister, for those thoughts. Let me start from the other side of the coin and talk about the consumers. All of us are consumers in our lives. We're hopefully employed, we've got jobs, there's industry, there's government trying to keep things under control, be competitive. So coming from the user end, what do you need? You need trust and assurance in the products you buy, the products you manufacture, the trade you undertake, the services you procure, within a seriously competitive and tough global environment. And to achieve that, the infrastructure has a critical role. And when we look at other countries, Neil, you were in Korea, I was in China this week, come back again since Tuesday night, and talking at the expo in Shanghai, you see the energy and the commitment of government, industry, and society to deliver something incredible. It's the transformation of Shanghai as a city to become a sort of all-electric environment. And you see government there really organised about its quality infrastructure. So one ministry under which sits all of the components of the British infrastructure. In Germany, you see another model, but similarly very, very coordinated. In the US, it's a tiny bit different, but the elements are there. So this point about that I welcome from the Minister about trying to coordinate and uplift the visibility of the infrastructure to support consumer, industry, government interests is so vital. We need to come together to think of the benefits, the value that we bring to consumers and industry and to government at large. So I think the digital solution is a massive unlocker in that area.
We have in the past our systems based on paper, frankly. We've been measuring things with scientists, we've been checking things with checkers, and in the standards world, we're bringing all those people together to agree what good looks like. But we've done it with paper-based processes, which we've then turned into PDF. And really the future is a digital architecture, as you all know with your smartphones. How can we exploit that so that consumers can understand what they're buying and trust it and trace it? And industry can really integrate its supply chains in an agile way. And the answer to that is international standards and accreditation and metrology. And your role in the global space there, Neil, in agreeing, the definition of time is absolutely as fundamental as agreeing standards on whiskey. So digitalization of the infrastructure and allowing us to communicate and interact more effectively is going to add massively to the competitiveness of the UK, as well as the protection of consumers.
I think, Scott, my scientist would love to go and work on whiskey instead of time.
Well, the good news is that we have just published BS 8636, which I launched in Shanghai on Monday morning to acclaim, actually, from the audience. All the ministers there just jumped up and said, we want to do that in China. And it's all about test methods and quality of whiskey. So the next tasting,
We should remember we're in the Methodist Central Hall, shouldn't we? So Minister, that digitally enabled a business community is central to that economic growth that you talk about, particularly AI and how business uses those kind of technologies. How do you? Obviously, there was the AI summit last week, and that seems to be a push in the right direction.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting, listening to Scott about consumers, giving consumers confidence. The whole system of our economy runs on confidence, and that's whether it's consumers or businesses. So this whole conversation, this whole the entire NQI supports that confidence, underpins the entire economy. And I've said a number of times in Parliament, particularly from the backbenches, as I spent most of my time in Parliament from the backbenches, that legislation is hopeless without implementation. So it needs to be carried through all the way through, and I think that's the great thing about this conversation. It goes right through to the market surveillance, they check the conformity, and then the market surveillance and enforcement. So really fantastic to work with the whole sector. But yes, data. I mean, we're looking to digitise our entire economy, of course, quite rightly, and we look on with envy at places like Estonia, where the whole economy is digitised, and we're going down the same track. So there's bound to be opportunities here in terms of standards, making sure that standards are right, whether it's AI or lots of different sectors, as well as digitising your own processes and the ways of doing things. But just pick out a couple of things that I'm personally involved in my ministerial capacity. One of the great successes of the UK is open banking, and we're looking to open up the entire economy like that. This is basically allowing interoperability of different databases, and we're looking to do the same thing in telecoms and energy and SME finance and lots of different areas, property market. You can imagine how that would facilitate much more speedy transactions, all these things. So there's many things we are doing in the whole data space, digital ID as well, of course. So the whole economy wants to see it digitised. It's far more efficient, it's far more effective. It underpins growth, which is a key driver for the government, and quite rightly so. So exciting times.
Yeah. And we talked in some of the breakout sessions earlier on about the future of work and what that looks like in a digital economy and the role of AI and other things. Obviously, for the quality infrastructure institutions, supporting businesses with that change is going to be key. But the world of work is changing, and obviously there's a role for the three organisations to support that. Scott, do you want to talk a little about the standards?
Well, we are on the cusp of the biggest revolution in business information, standards, regulation, for 30 years. I mean, this is an extraordinary moment in time. And I was on a call this morning with the ISO organisation and the IEC organisation around the data architecture by which we will agree a common structure for standards information globally for industry. That is an extraordinary change which will unlock the opportunity to put into workflow, into supply chains, digital solutions that eventually will be AI enabled, but which will allow no longer the sort of paper construct of standards and regulations and guidance and codes and industry practices and Bob's your uncle and stuff you made up in the pub. But all of that becomes fragmented, integrated, and used as streamlining the way manufacturing can produce what they want, adapt in an agile way, and deliver what the consumer wants, and receive feedback in that whole supply chain in a way that's never been possible before. So the digitalization of our work, what we call smart standards, machine accessible, readable, and transferable information, will allow us to bundle not just digital product passports, but conformity assessment test results, regulatory requirements, fragments of testing and checking. All of that will be bundled into the product or service in a way that is easy to cut for regulatory non-financial reporting requirements, for consumers to check, for government for check, from market surveillance to police. It's an extraordinary time in this industry.
And so, Matt, the Minister talked about the confidence that we're there to deliver. In a digital world, there's a different perspective, but that's just as important, if not more important.
Yeah, I quite agree, and I'd like to just build on some of the points that Scott made and the Minister made. Particularly, our objective, our purpose is to ensure that trust and confidence, as you mentioned, David. But how do we achieve that practically? And over the past few years, been working hard at UCAS to make sure that we have better systems and processes in order to gather relevant data and information. And now, funded through DBT, we have a major project on looking at putting in place digital identifiers for conformity assessment, cutting right across testing, inspection, certification, and now verification, to ensure that there can be that traceability, as Scott highlighted, so that a consumer or a regulator can see very clearly what is the basis of this product or this claim, what are the assumptions that have gone into it, what are they, how was that product manufactured, what are the CO2 elements to it, how should it be used, how should it be disposed of. That traceability is more and more what consumers want and what government and regulators need. So bringing those digital identifiers is a major project funded by DBT that UCAS will work on with the conformity assessment bodies. Last year we launched the UCAS Cert Check, which is for all management systems certification that gives much greater traceability. And we see in the near future the opportunity to give that better insight, oversight potentially for regulators or industry bodies, and using artificial intelligence, there more foresight into the way that markets operate. So there's huge opportunities. Scott has highlighted, the coming wave of risks and opportunities of artificial intelligence and quantum computers. I think we're just probably at the beginning of understanding how that plays out, but there's some very practical applications we can put into place, and with standards, with accredited conformity assessment, and traceability of metrology, such as calibration certificates. There's huge opportunities.
Yeah, that golden thread through the product line. And Neil, it all starts with the underlying science. And Matt talked there about quantum computing. There's so much happening at Teddington at the minute.
I'll come on to that if I may, but I'd like to just build on Matt's segue to the Minister's earlier comment. Being Welsh, I like to alliterate. So if you don't mind, please just bear with me with two sets of words. We focus our science in the digital age at the moment in what I think of as creating information, connecting information, and comprehending information, which leads to confidence in decisions being made. So, Minister, if I may, that creation of information, the connection in a 5G, 6G enabled world that our children, my children, live in more than I do, and comprehending in a world of quantum computation or artificial intelligence, that's the backbone to confidence. And everything that we do, not only are we the UK's National Lab for DSIT, very closely aligned with other parts of government in DBT and other departments. We are the UK's National Measurement Institute, and everything we do in measurement is purely about building confidence. So creating information, connecting information, comprehending information in that digitally enabled world, leading to confidence. That's really important to me. If I may, just a quick, I don't think it's diversion. We held a meeting with senior leaders from the quantum industry. So Matt, I'm building on your conversation about quantum computation. And we had CEOs from small companies up to large tier companies in communications or defence. And we said to them, what would you want from us as a national laboratory to support you in where you're going? And so my second alliteration, if you don't mind bearing with me, they said three things: skills, standards, supply chain. So everything that we talked about, I'm sure many of you will have read the Science and Technology Framework document that we published alongside the budget in the spring of this year, and the key emerging technology areas in artificial intelligence, in quantum, in engineered biology or synthetic biology. I'm old, I can call it synthetic biology, in future communications, in semiconductors. Those were the three words that they played to me: skills, standards, supply chain. If the UK wants to be at the forefront, the standards bit that we, I think, working with you, Minister, and your team, can help shape, forge, drive for the UK in that international environment. The standards is critical. Understanding the supply chain, and where do we own it, where do we control it, where do we have a vulnerability, is important. But that third piece, and it builds, Minister, on your words, the skills of our people in that digital generation. And I think when I joined government, I used to look to recruit people with a PhD from my favourite university. When I recruit people in the digital age now, I often look to a school leaver from their GCSE year who will, at the time they would join me as an apprentice, would actually have 14 years of digital experience. Mm-hmm. They were born with a tablet or a phone in their hand, and they know more. One of my professorships is in data science for national security. They teach me, you know, the students I lecture, they teach me to program. And I think we, as industry and us in government, need to be alive to that the digital skill set is a different skill set.
It's, yes, Scott, do you want to come in on that?
Well, I wanted to expand that to the thought of the UK's place in the world, actually, because the digital transformation is not just about us. It's about our opportunity globally and our opportunity to support sustainable development globally, to drive net zero transition, and to support developing and emerging economies who are going to race up that ladder through the opportunity that digital toolkits and digital trade passports provide. And I remember, David, when you went to Africa to make a little film, I think in 2020. He's been with BSI a long time. When they were making film, and you met a manufacturer on the shore of Lake somewhere around there, and he said, "Oh yes, I used these standards and I doubled my business," and that was before digitalization. Now we see the kind of work that's going on through the Standards Partnership, which is the FCDO-funded program to help support the delivery of standards and infrastructure in emerging economies. That we want to be part of our supply chain, as transformational again to them, stepping up another level. So now we're seeing the convergence, not just of manufacturing industry, but manufacturing industry with digital supply chains, with passports, with traceability, and the opportunity that brings to reduce friction at border crossings, and to start to bring together all of that kind of customs information with the product information and the skills that we need for that really right across everything. So again, as I would say, that there is this incredible support function we provide in demonstrating compliance, whether it's AI or whether it's children's toys. But actually we need to think, as I think we can in this country, about the freedom to use standards to drive advantage, not just to meet requirements. And when you think of that as a strategic opportunity to drive your business globally, and again, going back to thinking of British manufacturers and companies trying to do things in Africa or in China, that's the opportunity to drive business and drive productivity improvement. So it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, let's come back to that question about our international links. But Minister, there's a lot to go out there. There's the digital skills question, and there's the resilient supply chains and the role that we can play to support those.
Sure. I think the guy from 1920 was Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think. It surprises some people to know that actually the UK is the third largest tech sector, has the third largest tech sector in the world. behind US and China. It's a fantastic achievement. I was reading in a piece the other day about an AI founder investor in the UK. It says it's easier for them to recruit an AI specialist in the UK than it is in California. So that's a testament to where we are. And of course, we can't rest on our laurels, of course. So we've got to make sure we do take the right steps from here on in. But I mean, the other part of the framework I look after is the world of work. The employment framework, labour markets is part of my brief as well. I mean, a lot of people are worried about the impact of this stuff in terms of employment. I think it's a really exciting time. You know, the fact we can get rid of lots of repetitive tasks and stuff. I mean, I don't know if you watch Parliament for a couple of hours, you see a lot of repetition in there as well in terms of some of the debates. But you know, it's to have much more rewarding work, and I think this is part of the opportunity. So this can look on the outside, it can look pretty dry stuff. This, I guess, but the reality for people's lives is transformational. And we want the UK to be right at the forefront of that. To have this aspiration to be the global innovation hub by 2035. We're on that track, and all the work here underpins that work too. So, I say, fantastic, important work that you're all involved with. So exciting times.
Thanks to everybody who submitted questions. We will try and get through as many questions as we can. And we recognise that for the first time today, we've not done a very good job on gender balance on the stage. But we do have a Welshman, a Scotsman and 3 Northerners. So there's a bit of balance, I suppose. So in that global piece, obviously BSI, UCAS, MPL, you're all part of international systems. So obviously 3 of the foremost in their field. How do those international relations really help to deliver for the UK? Who would like to go first? Neil, you look like you're
Neil,
So let me jump on that. The first comment on the back of what the Minister said, I mentioned our 1,500 scientists and engineers. Is if any of you want to come to MPL, please do. When you walk through the door, you'll see 2 things. One is a great big clock, which is so accurate, it's linked to our major clock, it's so accurate that if you moved it from the floor to my seat, it would tell a difference in time based on the gravitational change and the interaction of time with gravity. That's a digression. The other thing you will see is a sign that says hello in 43 languages. And I think this is a testament to what the Minister said. Our workforce comes and represents 43 countries of the brightest and the best from around the world who want to come to work in our national laboratory because they see the British science as at the forefront. We're a member of an international community which spans 123 nations across the world. Most of the developed nations have their own equivalent to MPL. We like to think we're top 3, Minister, if I can, alongside the US and Germany, not China. So we think of ourselves as top 3, but we're a member of a community of 123 nations who all do, I won't call it measurement or metrology, the formal words that we've used, I'll call it confidence, because that's my word for it. All of those countries work together around the world so that when I know it's 12 o'clock in the UK, everybody from Shanghai, Scott, to Indonesia to Peru knows it's 12 o'clock in the UK, and we share that. You know, that is an international community, which we're very, very proud to be a leader of. The bit that's really important in my mind, if I come back to that skills standard supply chain, I've mentioned 43 ways of saying hello. Those skills are international, but the standards have to be international. We've just taken leadership of the UK Telecommunications Laboratory, which we've established in the Midlands. That's all about the security of our future communications network. That cannot be a UK national standard. It has to be an international standard. I'm working on autonomy, driverless cars. Let me just say driverless cars. I do not want to get in my driverless car, get on a ferry and drive on the wrong side of the road when I go to France. So the bulk of the digital standards that we have, David, back to your point, and Scott being in China, and those are now international standards, and that means we've got to be in that international conversation and arguably at the forefront of that international conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, no pressure. They're 3rd in the world, so any advance on that, Matt?
I think we, in a very similar way, have focused on being recognised and respected across the world, and UCAS certainly is, in a very similar way that BSI and MPL are too. I was listening to what Neil was saying then. I was thinking that rather than just kind of repeat some of the things that we're doing on an international level, because we do work, of course, and ensure we have leadership positions in ILAC and IF, but I think the way to describe it from another perspective is this is part of the UK's soft power. In the work that we do at UCAS, and I know BSI and MPL do it as well, we are taking forward British standards and values of openness and integrity and quality, and that furthers our economy. And so it's vital that we continue to work together collaboratively as institutions and continue to receive the support of the UK government to do that. That's especially important in this post-EU world, where we're fighting almost individually as a nation to continue to have influence. It's not just working with the institutions or regional bodies of accreditation or international level through ILAC and IF. It's also working closely with WTO and UNCFACT or the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, the Institute of Export, because we're all there to ensure that we help to develop standards and conformity assessment and ensuring that trust and confidence on a global basis. And so that's a key part, I think, for us, is that soft power and building that for the UK.
And through the multilateral arrangements that you've got in Ireland.
Definitely, yeah.
You work with UCAS, you're working with, it's a passport to trade around the world, right?
And that's been a major challenge, especially because of Brexit, where the recognition of conformity assessment between the UK and the EU has been challenged, in many cases unfairly, because of an over-interpretation of EU regulations. But we strongly advocate and continue to do that through industry, through the economy, and especially to government, that a mutual recognition agreement with the EU is vital to our future and trade with the EU, our largest trading partner. And that's something I know that the government supports, and is something we'll continue to take forward in the future. But the fundamental basis of mutual recognition of tested once and accepted everywhere is a major principle of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, how important is it for the UK to lead on the global standards on these emerging technologies of the future?
Well, absolutely critical, actually, because just to build on Matt's thought there about mutual recognition is widely thought of as a sort of SOP. It's very easy. Actually, it's not possible in the world of standards. You can mutually recognize the results of conformity assessment. You can say, I've crash tested this car here in this country. I don't need to crash test it here. I recognize the test results, the outcome of that process. So mutual recognition is entirely valid in that test world. But you cannot mutually recognize standards. Because here, this standard says this product is blue, and this one is red, and they're colored, therefore I recognize them. No, they're different. They're different. You can't say, pardon the measurement analogy, I'll recognize your meter if you recognize my 3 feet. When you're doing crash testing of vehicles, it's not the same. So it is vital that the UK is at the top table of international standards development, because we are looking to create one common standard that is adopted by countries all around the world. And we are and maintain our position as one of the 6 permanent members of the ISO community. Many of you will know that. The IEC community, not talked about enough, frankly, and we're hosting the IEC next year in Edinburgh for the first time for 30 years. So the International Electrical Commission, the International Organisation of Standardisation, where the vast body of our work goes, and BSI maintains the UK membership. I pay the same amount of money on your behalf as the US. Joe Batia, who was on the phone this morning, banging the table again about how much America pays. We pay the same as them. So we sit at the top table in that community, and we also support DCIT in the treaty organization, the International Telecommunications Union, which is where all the argy-bargy goes on about telecoms and radio, and there's a lot of stuff in there. There are countries in there who play quite dirty games to get what they want because they can't use the ISO and IEC system so effectively. So these 3 organizations form the global backbone of international standards, and BSI is supporting DCIT in the ITU and industry, and then of course we are helping to manage your participation in ISO and IEC. So really fundamental. And the result of that has been extraordinary. All the leading business standards that the world uses today started life as British standards, I mean, practically, and you wrote them. So we need more people to help us do this, because as we develop the softer side of doing business, the softer side of being a good enterprise, British Standard for Menopause launched this year, how do you be a better employer is as important as how do you manage your processes, net zero transition or ESG, and how do you manage your products. So all of this work body is just growing and growing. But it's critical that we're at the table as quantum technologies starts to surface in the standards world, and we are on the cusp of securing for the UK the second only joint technical committee between ISO and IEC on quantum, a proposal that we made on your behalf. I went with Peter Sissons to NIST in Washington in January and said the UK is going to propose an international committee on quantum. And the Americans said, nice idea, Scott, not this year. And I said, no, we're going to challenge you. So we won the vote, and we're on the cusp of securing that for the UK, which is a major breakthrough. So from quantum technologies to food testing and children's toys, we have to be at that top table because, as I said, you cannot mutually recognize standards. If we go out with that whiskey standard to China and we say, let's work on this as the national standard for whiskey in China, we instantly put 20% on UK exports to China. It's that easy. And the Germans know this well. That's why they control the automobile space so heavily. And the UK needs to control the business domain. So international participation is vital.
Yeah. And it was interesting to hear from one of our chairs, who I don't think is here today. He turned up to a meeting as representing the UK, and there was 17, I think, from China.
Yeah, this is very common now. They're very common that other countries are able to send lots of experts into the committee, and you know, I feel for you if you're there on your own trying to argue your corner. I'm also very pleased, and you did mention it, Matt, earlier, that we did secure through the turbulent times of the Brexit period, we did continue to secure UK stakeholder access, full access to the European regional standard system. And I think that was a measure of our standing in the European community, that we were able to win that vote and maintain UK access. I mean, they needed us, we need them too. In the European regional standards are the same genre, same family as international standards. It's all part of that discussion.
So, Minister, 3 organisations there that are foremost in their field, I'd say, and how much does that kind of soft power play into the trade side of your department's brief?
Yeah, it's hugely important, and I've been at events where the international communities come together in the NQI, and you see what high regard the UK has held it, but also the high regard we hold of the nations, which is exactly how it should be. Brexit's been mentioned a couple of times, so I'm going to mention it. It was always going to cause problems, of course, and we talked about frictions at the borders, and some of the tech we're doing, of course, that we're talking about can really help with this kind of stuff. But I think most people recognise, I think we've turned a bit of a corner with the European Union, actually. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, but if you look at the Windsor Framework and Horizon, we are developing a much more collaborative relationship, and quite right too. So, of course, we would like a mutual recognition agreement, and it's not all within our gift, of course, but on a bilateral basis, and I was in Germany recently talking to ministers over there, and I was in Spain last weekend at a bilateral conference. There's massive commitment and energy behind greater collaboration on lots of these areas. So the blocker has a little bit been around the bureaucracy and the protocols of the EU, and possibly some politics in there as well, a little bit. But I think we're putting that behind us. And so I think the opportunities for the future in terms of collaboration, there's no better example of how this can work across internationally and globally. And we want the European Union to be part of that as well, and our relationship to be like that as well. So I think there's definitely, as the appetite grows in terms of some of the individual nations, I think the appetite will grow in the European Union as well. But further afield, we talk a lot about the frictions at the borders, and we've got things like a single trade window, which will make life much easier based on a lot of the technology we've been talking about today, due to implementation by 2025. It's important to note 77% of our global trade is not with the European Union. Only 23% of it, in terms of goods, that is. Goods to the European Union is 23% of our international trade. The rest is made up of other nations and in services. So, so there's lots we can do right across the globe in terms of trade, and of course the NQI underpins all that.
Great.
One of the interesting factors for the UK playing globally is having that confidence of other European nations.
Yeah.
Because to the frustration of other countries, it's kind of one country, one vote. So if we can scoop up some votes in our region when we go globally, we've got some support. So it's very helpful.
So let's think about regulation here. Since EU exit, obviously the opportunities are there for us to build a smarter regulatory framework. So I'd be interested in the QI organisations and the Minister to talk a little bit about smarter regulation and the role that we can play together on that. Matt, do you want to have a go first on that?
Yeah, building on what we've already said earlier at the beginning of this session, the national quality infrastructure gives, I believe, both to the public and to consumers and to government, a proportionate, risk-based and agile approach to achieving any objective, particularly regulatory objectives, especially where it can be risk-based, focused on specific products that need to be addressed with appropriate standards of performance or quality, or whether it's the safety of artificial intelligence or the cybersecurity of a device which may have internet-enabled features. So the national quality infrastructure of standards, of appropriate conformity assessment, whether testing or inspection or factory production control, and then that measurement provides that suite of tools of which government can use proportionately. Now, it may not always be the case that there's a standard that follows then with conformity assessment that follows with some aspect of calibration, for example, but what the national quality infrastructure does is give the toolkit, it gives the spectrum, or in other words, it gives a system, a framework of which government can use, or industries can use, consumer bodies can use to use that toolkit to achieve the ultimate objective of better quality, regulatory compliance, net zero, whatever it might be.
Yeah, Scott? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've used the word there, Matt, and I think, Minister, you know what I'm about to say. We need a systems approach, and by integrating the infrastructure institutions more closely in the way we work in a virtual kind of way, we can take a much more speedy and systemic approach to the issues of the day. An example that we tackled a few years ago now was on competence in the built environment, where we needed to work very closely, an emerging piece of regulation, a whole new area to regulate individual people working in the built environment in high-risk buildings. How do you do that from scratch? I mean, if you take a systems approach to that and you think, well, we need accreditation, we need new standards, we already have a lot of industry standards, we've got a lot of organizations, we've got residents and consumers who need to be protected and assured that they are safe. How do we build that system together? And in the old days, we'd have done this one step at a time, and 10 years would have passed, and we'd have, like the fourth rail bridge, been back to the beginning. But in this approach, we work together to say, let's co-design this solution, and you do this and you do that, and then we can begin to see and model it, how it works together. And that, I think, was very successful. So I'm excited, David, about the prospect of taking a more systems-led approach, using the whole infrastructure, bringing together our industry stakeholders, our consumer community, market surveillance, government, academia, together to work on the issues of the day and solve them in a much more fast and coherent and efficient way than we ever used to. That is so important because we haven't got time anymore. We need answers quickly.
Neil? On that question of smarter regulation?
Yeah, so I'd just build on the points my colleagues made. I'm very focused on the systems approach. I think that's really important. I think that there's probably two observations from my perspective, which have been touched on. The first is we often look at regulation through the prism of failure, regulatory failure. And, we were talking earlier with some colleagues here about construction and thoughts on regulation in construction where it has not worked. Whereas in other nation states, they often look at regulation as an advantage. A very simple example, aviation security, any major airport in the world, if you want to fly to the US, you have to comply with US regulation on aviation security and standards. And the only way to comply is to buy US equipment into your airport. So they use regulation as a tool for trade and an advantage, whereas often we look at it as a burden and a block. The second point, and I'd pick up on Scott's word of agile, is that we sometimes think regulation is something that we can do in a process that takes many, many years. And the world, particularly in the digital emerging technologies, is not like that anymore. And if we don't move quickly, if we don't move in parallel and collaboration with industry, the standard will set itself, the regulation will set itself, driven by the consumer, not necessarily what's best from that whole system's perspective. And I think that just means we, whether we're an arm's length body like my laboratory, or we're in central government in Department for Business and Trade or DSIT, we've got to look at it through that prism of pace, that speed of development, because if we don't keep ahead of that curve will get ahead of us, and you can't play catch up.
So, Minister, I mean, it doesn't seem to me like a government that's keen to heavily regulate or to impose regulatory burdens on industry. How do you see the quality infrastructure supporting this smarter regulation approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point you make. I mean, the reality is all regulation is paid for by consumers at the end of the day. Yeah. You know, there is an investor puts money into something that you've got to return the cost of capital back to that investor first, and then and if it was just the same as you're going to get in a bank, you might as well put it in the bank. So you need a premium on that to be able to get a return, and the more you regulate a business, there's a cost attached to that. So that's why we're always nervous about regulation. But I am not in any shape or form against regulation. You will not get clean rivers without regulation. You will not get safe products without regulation. You will not make sure it's a fair and level playing field without regulation. What we're against is unnecessary regulation, of course, duplication of regulation, and mindless bureaucracy, which does happen, as we all know. So that's what we're nervous about. But I think, so we've got a couple of things going on now, the better regulation framework and the smarter regulation to grow the economy. So there's an emphasis on regulation that supports growth in the economy that just doesn't simply mitigate risk. Yeah. And I think that's the balance you're trying to strike between those two things. So if there are alternatives to regulation or different types of regulation, for example, from my perspective, I actually think ex post regulation is more efficient than ex ante regulation. Otherwise, you get lots of people going around checking things, which I know is necessary in some parts of the economy. So just making sure, see how we regulate as much as what we regulate and how we actually enforce it. But absolutely, you can see what this delivers in terms of providing certainty for businesses, which provides certainty for consumers, which is, we certainly want to make sure safe for consumers, fair and level playing field for businesses. This is part of a framework that builds confidence, and we should never underestimate the importance of that.
Thanks, yeah.
And, I mean, just to build on, Matt used the word risk-based earlier, and I mean, this is the key. And one of the massive advantages that we have in the UK, I believe, is that we are very structured around performance-based regulation. So the idea that it's not black and white, it's not prescriptive, it's about performance. It's very easy for consumers to understand. So the regulation is quite light touch, high level. It says, for example, in toy safety, toys shall not pose a risk of strangulation. That's all it says. It doesn't say what the diameter of the toy is or anything. That's the performance-based regulation, which is able to stand a very simple test, and then standards are used to enable that in a much more flexible way. So we can be very nuanced about the way that we use regulation, co-regulation, earned recognition, to sort of paint a palette to approach new technologies and to explore ways of driving and accelerating innovation and driving productivity without having to say, well, it's black or it's white, it's regulated or it's unregulated. And I think we have a huge advantage there because we've got room for maneuver and we don't have the legacy that some other countries have. The US, I think, in particular, is extremely prescriptively regulated in space, India too, and China. So we have room to explore ways of regulation which are more innovative.
We need to draw this to a close. Now, I'll come finally to you, Minister, with some words, but maybe first of all, from the three organisations, I'm keen to hear from you about what takeaways we should have for the three organisations, how you're going to work together. Your stakeholders are in the room. They'll hold you to task. What can you deliver differently? What can you deliver to solve their problems of the future? Scott, do you want to have it?
All right, David, thank you. My vision is that we are working as a team, and not just the three of us, but actually Chartered Trading Standards Institute, the boots on the ground, the market surveillance team, the intellectual property office. There are loads of organisations that are supportive of what we're trying to do, working as a team to offer to our industry community, to our consumer community, and to government a systems-led approach to solving the issues of the day. So that's my vision, that instead of operating as separate entities, we cohere our approach and we offer coherent solutions on policy-led outcomes to achieve results. That's my takeaway.
Great, thanks, Scott.
So I'll start where Scott has left off there, and I think it's very much about a systems-wide solution that allows that risk-based proportional approach that enables that scalability and actually I'd say a very efficient, cost-efficient mechanism to achieve a regulatory outcome for government. So a systems-wide approach using the spectrum of tools that we have. I think also what the Minister said right at the beginning is that it's a digitally enabled quality infrastructure. Let's go back to that point because it's critical. We have the capability between the four partners, I'd say, the columns in the quality infrastructure, to be able to deliver that effectively in the future. We have three strong institutions here. We do work together very collaboratively, not just for the UK, but our international reputation and recognition is key.
Right, thanks, Matt. Neil.
I think Scott and Matt, between them, have stolen pretty much everything I was going to say. The key bit in my mind, and this goes all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, and Scott, I think it was you, sir, that mentioned it, is that we are separated institutions in the UK, and that's a little bit different to the way other nation states brigade their quality infrastructure. And to me, the clue's in the title. It's an NQI, it's a National Quality Infrastructure. It's not a bunch of disparate organisations doing their own thing. It needs to be a much more joined up endeavour. And I do think we've seen a lot of progress recently as we've looked at standards for the fourth industrial revolution and a lot more joining together of the different organisations. And I think we could serve you better if we were more coherent, more integrated in our approach. We're talking to the US and Scott's talking to the US, and if we had that single voice, we would be more powerful together. And I think we're moving in the right direction. And then the other thing, it builds on the systems approach, and it builds on what the Minister said. Don't over-regulate, don't impose standards where you don't need them. Where do standards or regulation or legislation make the most difference to you? Not from my side, not from my scientists or Scott's experts, but where does it matter most to you? Yeah. And then how do we focus on those are the things to make a difference on quick?
Yeah. So relevance, focus, and a much more joined up approach.
And joined up.
Excellent. Minister, final word to you, please.
Yeah, thanks. Well, unashamedly, I'm pro-business, business minister. You'd expect me to say that. And I'll say the reason why. And the best way to articulate this is the words of Winston Churchill, of course, who said, some people see private enterprise as a tiger that needs to be shot. Some people see it as a cow they can milk. Few people see it for what it really is, and that's a strong horse that pulls the whole cart. So we should never forget that. But I think what this conversation is about, there's a received wisdom, of course, that the market solves all problems more efficiently than anybody else. It can solve problems pretty efficiently. I mean, some people say, well, you know, what would the iPhone look like if the public sector had built it? Interesting. And how long would it have taken? Interesting. But having said that, the touchscreen on this was developed by the US military, as was the GPS. So it is a partnership. And I think this is where this conversation is, a public-private partnership, and business can't do without it. So, you know, if you asked me my first day as business minister and somebody said, what's the NQI, or National Quality Infrastructure, I said, what the bloody hell is that? And despite the fact I was in business for 30 years, so it just illustrates the importance of this work. And I meet with Neil, Matt and Scott on a regular basis, and I get the message all the time. This wants to be a systems-based approach and more collaborative working. I'm very keen to facilitate that. So my door's always open, and we'll continue the conversation, and can I just thank you all for the work you do.
Excellent. Well, please join me in thanking Scott, Matt, Neil.
Thank you. I was involved with the US military on their first GPS system. That's how old I am.
There you go. Thank you. Okay.
Well, thank you, David and the panel, really amazing, and thank you to the Minister for making the time to come and join us today. It's much appreciated. That brings us to the end of our event today, and I think there's part of me that thinks like I've sat in this room for a very long time, and part of me that just can't believe the conversations that I've heard from Greg this morning, who sort of highlighted a lot of challenges, but as well gave us quite a lot of room for hope and positiveness, and I think that was really a really powerful speech. And then the panel this afternoon, which really just kind of I summed up in one line, which says the future requires a flexible way to handle speedy innovation, and when we've sorted that out, we will all be fine. And I think it's if you combine that with Greg, which says human minds don't think the problems are ever going to hit us. That we always assume somebody else is going to solve it in the next generation, it kind of makes you realise that we've got to go a bit faster, because we might not have, you know, we've got to sort things out for the next generation. So I think it's an amazing collection of thoughts and impressions that we've been left with today. First of all, I would like to ask you to sort of thank and join me in thanking all of our speakers and our exhibitors who've been in the knowledge marketplace today. So if we can give them a round of applause, that would be great. It's vital to the success of our standards conferences that we have all these people contribute. It's vital to all our work in standards that we have all of you contribute, and we're really grateful to all of your time and effort that you put into that work. So aside from that work, I'd really like to extend our thanks to you for being here today. It's amazing to have this room so full for the whole day, and we're really chuffed to bits that you could all be with us. So chuffed that we're going to do a little bit more admin, so bear with me. In a minute, a QR code is going to appear magically on the screen, I hope. And if you can photograph that, we love your feedback on the event today. We learn from the feedback, and we do take it on board. So please be free with your thoughts. The second thing is, in a moment, we're going to extend an invitation out to you all to come and join us in the library, which is the room you've had lunch in, for some drinks, and we hope very much that you'll join us there. And the third thing, my colleagues are looking at me because they think I'm going to forget, but I'm not, is that we also this evening are moving into another event, which is celebrating 120 years of the Kite Mark, which is really a mark of trust, and we are very proud to be part of the organisation that has the Kite Mark. They've got an event, and they have asked that we extend that invitation out to anybody who would like to stay for that as well. So it goes on into the evening, and you'd be most welcome. So please feel free to stay for the whole of Thursday night, if you wish. So once again, thank you very much for being here, and let's just end with a round of applause, and we look forward to seeing you next year.